You should have just taken the check, Isabelle. Now you're going to walk out of here with nothing. He said it low, almost sweet, the way Sebastian always delivered his worst lines, like he was doing you a favor. I didn't answer him. I sat on that hard wooden bench outside courtroom 7, hands folded in my lap, and I looked straight at the cracked tile floor. Outside, Cleveland was gray, January gray, the kind of cold that gets into the courthouse walls and stays there. Inside, it was no warmer. Sebastian straightened his tie. He bought it 2 months ago. I know because I found the receipt, tucked inside the breast pocket of his coat the same night I found the other receipt, the one that changed everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. His lawyer, Louis Anders, was already moving through the hallway like he owned it. Shiny shoes, bigger briefcase, the kind of confidence you rent by the hour. He clapped Sebastian on the arm. "We're ready. This is done in 20 minutes. "That's what I told her," Sebastian said. He glanced back at me then, waiting. He wanted to see fear. That's what Sebastian always needed, to watch something flinch. I gave him nothing. 9 years of marriage, 9 years of keeping his world running, the mortgage on our house in Lakewood, the car payments, the savings accounts he never once looked at. I was the one who knew every number, every password, every dollar. He was the big personality, the sales director at a logistics firm downtown, the man who walked into every room like he was already winning. I was the woman behind the spreadsheet. He thought that made me invisible. Morgan, that was her name. I learned it 4 months ago. She was his office manager, younger, louder. She had an Instagram full of champagne glasses and captions that made me want to be sick. She was sitting 3 rows behind us in that hallway right now, wearing Sebastian's old college sweatshirt, like it was a trophy. Sebastian leaned down one more time, one hand braced on the bench beside me, voice dropping to almost nothing. "You spent 9 years playing it safe, Isabelle. That was your mistake. Safe people finish last." I looked up at him then, right in the eyes. I held his gaze for exactly 3 seconds. "We should go in," I said. "The judge is waiting." He blinked. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not fear, not yet, just the first flicker of something he didn't expect. Then he laughed it off and walked toward the courtroom doors. I stood. I picked up my bag. It was heavy, full of paper, full of numbers, full of a truth he had no idea I was carrying. He thought this was the day he buried me. He had no idea it was the day I had been building toward for 4 months. If you've ever had to stay quiet while someone underestimated you, you already know how this feels. Like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Drop it below. It started with a coat. Not a fight, not a lipstick stain, not a late-night phone call I wasn't supposed to hear. It started with me doing what I always did, taking care of the small things he never bothered to notice. It was a Tuesday in October, the kind of night Cleveland does well, wet, cold, the rain hitting the kitchen window in sheets. I had dinner going, pot roast, Sebastian's favorite. Things had been off between us for weeks. He was distant, snapping at small things, coming home late with that buzzing, distracted energy I had started to recognize but not yet name. I thought a good meal might crack it open. Maybe we could actually talk. I was still trying. That matters. I want you to know that. I was still trying. Ordinary moment, then the shift. I heard the garage door at 7:30. He came in through the mudroom, shaking rain off his coat, barely looked at me. "Long day," he said. "I need a shower." He hung his coat and walked upstairs. I went to move it closer to the radiator so it wouldn't dry stiff and musty. That was just something I did. One of 100 invisible things I did every single week without him ever noticing. I reached into the inside pocket to check for receipts before it dried. He was always leaving things in there: gas slips, parking tickets, random notes. My fingers closed around a piece of paper. I pulled it out. It was damp. I almost crumpled it, but the logo stopped me. Harmon and Voss Fine Jewelers, East 4th Street, downtown Cleveland. Sebastian had never once set foot in a place like that for me. Our wedding rings came from a mall chain. He said it was practical. I said okay. I smoothed the receipt flat against the mudroom bench. The total made my vision blur. $4,800. One item, a rose gold bracelet, diamond set, engraved. I looked at my wrist. I was wearing the same rubber band fitness tracker I'd had for 3 years. Desperate logic. Denial. Maybe it was for me. Our anniversary was 6 weeks out. Maybe he'd actually planned ahead for once. Maybe. Then I looked at the date. October 9th, a Tuesday, 1:17 in the afternoon. On October 9th, Sebastian told me he was in Columbus, a regional sales conference. He texted me a photo of a hotel lobby. That morning, he said the conference ran all day. Columbus is 2 hours away. Harmon and Voss is 7 minutes from his office. The pot roast was still simmering on the stove. The rain was still hitting the window. Upstairs, I could hear the shower running. Everything was exactly the same as it had been 5 minutes ago, except I was different. Controlled devastation. I didn't scream. I didn't sit down on the floor. I folded that receipt into a tight, clean square, and I put it in the pocket of my own jeans. Then I walked back into the kitchen, and I stirred the pot. The performance begins. When Sebastian came downstairs, hair still damp, I put a plate in front of him and I asked him how Columbus was. He leaned back in his chair and sighed. Brutal. Back-to-back sessions all day. Didn't even get lunch until 3. He shook his head. You know how those things go. I nodded. I said, that sounds exhausting. I refilled his water glass. I watched his mouth move, and I thought, how long has he been doing this? How many dinners? How many questions I asked with a smile while he answered me with a lie so smooth it didn't even cost him anything. Decision point. This is where she changes. That night, after he fell asleep, I lay on my side of the bed in the dark and I made a decision. I was not going to confront him, not yet, not with one receipt and a bad feeling. I was going to find everything, every dollar, every lie, everything he thought he had hidden, and I was going to document every single one of them before he ever knew I was looking. He had no idea that the woman he'd been lying to for months was the woman who managed every account, knew every password, and never, not once, forgot a number. He handed me the weapon. He just didn't know I knew how to use it.
I called in sick the next morning. I never called in sick. In 11 years at Meridian Data Solutions, I had taken exactly 4 sick days. 3 of them were for a surgery on my knee, and 1 was the day my grandmother died. My supervisor sounded genuinely alarmed when I called. I told her it was a stomach thing. She said, "Feel better?" I hung up and opened my laptop. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had paid every bill in this house for 9 years, and I opened a new spreadsheet. I named it one word: balance. I need you to understand something about our finances. Sebastian earned more than me. He made sure I knew that. His commission checks were bigger than my salary, and he brought it up the way some men bring up height, casually, often, like it just kept occurring to him. What he never mentioned was that I managed every dollar of it, every account, every automatic payment, every login. I had built the entire financial structure of our life from the ground up because Sebastian found money boring until he wanted to spend it. He called me his secret weapon. I thought it meant it as a compliment. I started with the joint checking account. 12 months of statements. I went through them line by line the way I go through data at work, methodically, no assumptions, just looking for what doesn't belong. It started 6 months ago. Small cash withdrawals, 200 here, 300 there. Unremarkable on their own, but they were consistent, weekly, and then they got larger. Then I found the transfers, recurring, labeled in the memo field as, and I want you to really hear this, vendor services. Sebastian was not a vendor. He did not have a side business. He was a sales director who couldn't work the TV remote without asking me which button to press. I traced the account number the transfers were going to, an online bank, the kind that takes 10 minutes to open and asks very few questions. I used Sebastian's social security number, which I knew by memory, the way I knew every number attached to our life, to reset the access credentials. I got in. It wasn't a business account. It was a personal account he had opened 8 months ago and never told me about, and the money flowing out of it told a story that made the bracelet receipt look minor. Dinner reservation, valet parking, hotel, 1 night, downtown Cleveland, another hotel, 2 nights, Sandusky, a weekend in Chicago that I had been told was a company retreat, a car service, flowers, a spa, a coat, boots. None of it was for me. I entered every transaction into the spreadsheet. Date, amount, description. Calm, steady. My hands did not shake. I had decided the night before that I was not going to feel any of this until I had all of it. Grief was for later. Right now, I needed to think. The number that broke the calm. In 8 months, Sebastian had moved $41,000 out of our shared life and into that account. $41,000. I sat back in my chair. $41,000 that was supposed to go toward the house we talked about upgrading to, the children we talked about having, the future I had been quietly building while he was spending it on someone else. I almost closed the laptop. I almost told myself I had enough. But I'm a data manager. I don't stop until I've pulled the full report. So I opened the investment account, the one I had set up 3 years ago when my grandmother passed. She had saved her entire life, waitressing in Akron for 30 years, and she left me $60,000. I put it away. I told Sebastian it was our safety net, something we never touched. I logged in. The screen loaded. The balance was 0. I refreshed the page. I thought it was an error, a glitch, something wrong with the browser. 0. I pulled the transaction history. 11 weeks ago, the full amount had been withdrawn in a single transfer. I traced it to a title company on the west side of Cleveland. I searched the property records on the county website. A condominium, purchased 11 weeks ago. Owner of record, Sebastian Ray Mitchell. He had used my grandmother's money, $60,000 she saved waitressing for 30 years, money she set aside her whole life to give me something solid to stand on. He used it to buy himself a place to land when he left me. I sat in the kitchen for a long time after that. The coffee got cold. The house was completely silent. I thought about my grandmother, her hands, her laugh, the way she used to say, "You're the careful one, Isabelle, that's your gift." I did not cry. I opened a new tab. I started searching for divorce attorneys who specialized in financial fraud. Because this wasn't just a cheating husband anymore. This was theft. This was a man who looked me in the eyes every single day for 11 weeks, knowing what he had done, knowing whose money it was, knowing what it meant to me, and he smiled at dinner, and he kissed my cheek in the morning, and he called me his secret weapon. I found an attorney by noon. I had an appointment by 3. And when I walked into that office the next morning with a binder I had built overnight, every statement, every transfer, every receipt, every lie documented in clean, precise order, the attorney looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at me. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, "your husband has no idea what he married." For 6 weeks, I was 2 people.
There was the Isabelle that Sebastian saw every morning, the one who made coffee, asked about his day, laughed at the right moments, and never once let her face show what was happening underneath. And then there was the other Isabelle, the one working quietly in the background, dismantling everything he thought he had already won. He never noticed the difference. That should tell you everything about the kind of husband he was. My attorney's name was Caleb Hurst, small office on Prospect Avenue, second floor above a dry cleaner. No marble lobby, no glass walls, just a desk covered in files, a window that looked out onto a gray Cleveland street, and a man who'd spent 22 years doing exactly one thing: untangling the financial wreckage that men like Sebastian left behind. He didn't say much when I handed him the binder. He read for almost 20 minutes without looking up. I sat across from him and watched the street below. A woman walking a dog, a delivery truck double parked, the ordinary world continuing as if mine hadn't just collapsed. Finally, he set it down. "You're thorough," he said. "I'm a data manager," I said. "No," he said. "Thorough is organizing your receipts. This is something else." He took off his glasses and set them on the desk. "This is a case, Mrs. Mitchell, a real one." I had not cried once since the night I found the receipt, not once in 6 weeks, but sitting in that office, hearing someone say out loud that I wasn't crazy, that the numbers meant what I thought they meant, something moved in my chest. I pressed it down. There would be time for that later. "I want everything back," I said. "The condo, the money, all of it." Caleb leaned back. He explained the plan slowly, the way you explain something to someone who needs to stay calm under pressure. It had a name: sandbagging. We would file for divorce, clean, straightforward papers, no mention of the fraud, no mention of the condo, no mention of the account. We would let Sebastian's attorney see a grieving wife asking for a fair split. We would let Sebastian get comfortable. "When a man thinks he's winning," Caleb said, "he gets sloppy. He stops being careful. He will lie on his financial disclosure forms because he thinks you don't know enough to catch him." "And when he lies to the court under oath," I said, "then the binder comes out, and the judge handles the rest." I liked this plan. It fit me the way a well-organized spreadsheet fits a complicated problem. Quiet, precise, no wasted motion. "I do it," I said. 3 days later, Sebastian was served at his office downtown. He came home that evening and I heard him before I saw him. The front door, hard. The windows in the entryway shook. He came into the kitchen where I was reading, papers in his hand, face red, already in the middle of a sentence. "What is this, Isabelle? You want to do this? Fine, fine. But I am telling you right now, you walk away from this marriage with what you came in with. That's it." I set my book down. I marked the page first. Then I looked at him. "I know about Morgan." 1 sentence, no volume, no tears. He stopped. You could see him processing it, deciding how to play it. And then, and this is the part that still makes my stomach turn, he sat down. He actually sat down across from me and crossed his ankle over his knee like we were about to negotiate a car price. "Okay," he said. "Yeah, Morgan and look, it got serious. I wasn't planning it. These things happen." These things happen. 9 years, and that was the sentence he chose. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, that voice he used when he wanted something, smooth, reasonable, like he was the only adult in the room. "Here's the reality, Isabelle. You cannot afford this house alone. My income has been carrying us for years. My attorney is going to make that very clear. So the smart move, the practical move, is to take what I'm offering, sign the papers, and let this be over. No mess, no dragging it out." I looked at him, this man who had stolen $60,000 from my grandmother's memory and was now sitting in the kitchen she would never see, offering me scraps with the confidence of someone who had already counted money that wasn't his. calm, almost gentle. This is the most dangerous she'll sound all chapter. I have an attorney too, I said. He almost laughed. Isabelle, he said. His name is Caleb Hurst, Prospect Avenue. You should tell Louis Anders. Something crossed his face, gone in a second. He stood up, adjusted his jacket, picked up his keys. Do it the hard way then. Don't say I didn't give you a chance. He left that night, took a bag, drove straight to the condo, the one on the west side, the one bought with my grandmother's $60,000, and I imagine he called Morgan before he even pulled out of the driveway. I locked the front door behind him. I slid the deadbolt. I stood in the entryway for a moment with my hand still on the lock, and then I did something I had not done in 6 weeks. I sat down on the bottom stair, and I cried. Not for him, not for the marriage. I cried for the version of me that used to make pot roast on a Tuesday, hoping it would fix something that was already gone. I cried for the 9 years I spent making myself smaller so he could feel larger. I cried for my grandmother, whose careful, hard-working life had been spent without her permission by a man who never deserved a single dollar of it. I cried for maybe 10 minutes. Then I stopped, I wiped my face, I went to the kitchen table, I opened the laptop. I had 4 weeks until the hearing. There was still work to do. I opened a new bank account at a credit union on the east side, one Sebastian had never heard of. I began redirecting my paycheck there immediately. I removed my name from the joint credit cards. I froze my credit. I photographed every asset in the house, the watches, the electronics, the golf clubs he'd bought with money we were supposed to be saving. I cataloged all of it. Every night for 4 weeks, while Sebastian slept in a condo bought with stolen money and Morgan posted pictures with captions about new beginnings, I sat at that kitchen table and I built the case that was going to take it all back. He thought I was at home grieving. He thought the quiet meant I was broken. He had filed his financial disclosure forms with the court that week. I had just received a copy, through Caleb. I read through it carefully, line by line. The condo was not listed. The private account was not listed. The gambling debts were not listed. He had just lied to a federal court under oath, and I had every single page of proof sitting in a binder on my kitchen table. Tomorrow was the hearing.
We are back in that hallway now. Sebastian straightening his tie, Louis Anders and his shiny briefcase, Morgan 3 rows back in Sebastian's college sweatshirt, scrolling her phone like this was an inconvenience she had already moved past. And me, sitting on that hard bench, bag in my lap, saying nothing. You watched this scene at the beginning and you thought you knew what it was. A woman sitting quietly because she was afraid. A wife who had already lost before she walked through the door. Now you know what it actually was. That silence wasn't fear. It was the last few minutes of a plan 4 months in the making. Every number accounted for, every lie documented, every stolen dollar traced back to its source. I wasn't sitting quietly because I had nothing to say. I was sitting quietly because I was done talking. Courtroom 7 was smaller than you'd imagine for the size of what was about to happen inside. Fluorescent lights, wood paneling the color of old coffee, 2 tables facing a raised bench, a flag in the corner that had seen better decades. Judge Aidan Marsh had been on the family court bench for 19 years. He had a reputation in Cleveland legal circles for 2 things: patience and 0 tolerance for people who wasted it. He was already seated when Lee filed in. He did not look up from his papers. Louis Anders set his briefcase on the table with a sound that was slightly too loud to be accidental. Sebastian sat beside him, one arm draped over the back of his chair, relaxed, certain. He looked like a man who had already spent the settlement. Louis stood first. "Your Honor, My client, Sebastian Mitchell, has been the primary financial provider in this marriage for 9 years. Mrs. Mitchell has been employed part-time. I had worked full-time for 11 years at the same company. I felt Caleb's hand very briefly touch the table beside mine. Easy. Not yet. Lewis continuing, laying out the theft dressed as generosity. And given that disparity, Mr. Mitchell is prepared to offer a settlement that includes 3 months of transitional support and a percentage of the sale proceeds from the marital home. We believe this is more than fair given the circumstances. My client is ready to move forward today. Sebastian nodding like Lewis was reading a grocery list. 3 months. That's what 9 years was worth to him. 3 months and a percentage. He had $60,000 of my grandmother's money sitting in a condo on the west side, and he was offering me 3 months. Judge Marsh made a note. He looked at Caleb. Mr. Hurst, does your client find these terms acceptable? Caleb standing, unhurried. This was the moment. He stood slowly. He buttoned his jacket. He picked up the binder, the one I had built over 4 months, the one that weighed almost 4 pounds, the one that contained every number Sebastian thought I would never find. He walked to the bench. He set one copy in front of Judge Marsh. He walked to Louis Anders' table and set another copy down without a word. Then he walked back and he said, very quietly, "No, Your Honor, we do not." Louis reacting, dismissive. "Your Honor, my client has been fully transparent in his disclosure." "If I may," Caleb said. He opened his own copy of the binder. The evidence. Exhibit A. 12 months of joint account statements showing $41,000 in transfers to an undisclosed personal account. This account does not appear on Mr. Mitchell's financial disclosure. The room was quiet. Exhibit B. Property records for a condominium at 2240 West River Road, purchased 11 weeks ago. Owner of record, Sebastian Ray Mitchell. Down payment sourced from Mrs. Mitchell's separate inheritance account, $60,000, saved over 30 years by her late grandmother. This property does not appear on Mr. Mitchell's financial disclosure. I watched Sebastian's hand move to the table. He set it down flat. His jaw tightened. Louis was already leaning over the binder, turning pages, his expression changing from dismissive to something I could only describe as a man realizing his client had walked him into traffic. Caleb continuing, building. Exhibit C, Your Honor. Credit card records showing $23,000 in personal expenditures, hotels, jewelry, travel, clothing, charged against marital assets over 8 months. The primary beneficiary of these expenditures is Miss Morgan Sarai Schultz. Every head in that courtroom turned toward the gallery. Morgan had stopped scrolling her phone. Her face had gone the color of old chalk. She looked at Sebastian. He did not look back at her. Caleb, final exhibit. Voice should drop here. And Exhibit D, Your Honor. Documentation of $18,400 in online gambling losses, DraftKings, FanDuel, and 2 offshore platforms, funded directly from the joint marital savings account over the same period. These liabilities were not disclosed. Judge Marsh had not moved. He had been reading the binder as Caleb spoke. He turned one more page. Then he set it down. He looked at Sebastian over the top of his glasses for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was the temperature of the January air outside. "Mr. Mitchell, you submitted a financial affidavit to this court under oath."
Sebastian opened his mouth, closed it. Louis put a hand on his arm, but Sebastian shook it off. Your Honor, the account was for business purposes. I was going to. The condo was an investment. You intended to disclose $60,000 of your wife's inheritance that you used as a down payment on a private residence. It was not a question. Sebastian said nothing. Judge Marsh set down his pen. I am finding that Mr. Mitchell has deliberately dissipated marital assets, misappropriated separate property belonging to Mrs. Mitchell, and provided materially false information to this court. Mr. Anders, your client's settlement offer is rejected. Lewis stood. Your Honor, if we could request a brief, sit down, Mr. Anders. The condominium at 2240 West River Road is hereby awarded to Mrs. Mitchell in full as restitution for the misappropriated inheritance funds. The marital home in Lakewood is awarded to Mrs. Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell will assume sole liability for all undisclosed debts, including the gambling losses and the outstanding credit balances in his name. Sebastian's voice came out strange, thin, like air leaving something. That's everything. I'll have nothing left. Judge Marsh set down his pen. You had a wife who built everything you had. You should have thought about that before you stole from her. The gavel came down. It was the best sound I had ever heard in my entire life. I did not jump up. I did not turn around. I sat for a moment, with my hands in my lap, and I breathed. In, out. The fluorescent lights buzzed. Someone coughed in the gallery. Lewis was already leaning into Sebastian's ear, low and urgent. Sebastian was not listening. He was staring at the table. I stood. I gathered my things. I walked past his table. I kept my eyes forward. Isabelle. His voice, quiet now, nothing like the man in the hallway that morning, nothing like the man who whispered, "You're going to walk out of here with nothing." I stopped. I turned. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, like the air had gone out of him completely. His eyes were red at the edges. I don't have anywhere to go, he said. Pause. 1 beat. 2. You're a provider, Sebastian, I said. You told me that 9 years. I turned and walked out. She was waiting just outside the doors, arms crossed, eyes hard. You took the condo. That was supposed to be. It was bought with my grandmother's money. It was never yours. And Morgan, I looked at her, really looked at her. He has no assets and about $60,000 in debt. I'd think carefully about what comes next. She looked past me toward the courtroom doors. She looked at the exit. She did not wait. She did not wait. She turned and she walked, fast, heels loud on the tile, and she was gone before Sebastian even made it out of the room. I pushed through the courthouse doors into the January air, cold, sharp, the kind of Cleveland cold that hits your face like a clean fact. I walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat. I put my hands on the wheel. I thought I would feel triumph. I thought there would be this enormous rush the moment the movie plays the swelling music and the credits roll. But it wasn't like that. It was quieter than that, deeper. What I felt was weight leaving. 9 years. I had given 9 years to a man who saw my competence as convenience, who took my steadiness for granted, who looked at the person building his entire life and saw a background character, who stole from a dead woman's memory without losing a single night of sleep. He wanted to leave me with nothing. Instead, he left me with the house I had paid for, the money my grandmother saved for me, and the clearest picture I had ever had of exactly what I was worth. I drove home to Lakewood. I unlocked the front door. My front door now. No asterisk, no condition. I went to the kitchen. I made tea. I sat at the table where I had paid every bill, built every spreadsheet, and quietly held together a life that only one of us was actually living. I opened my laptop. I found the file called Balance. I looked at it one last time. Then I dragged it to the trash and I emptied it. Some people are going to watch this and say Isabelle got lucky, that the judge was sympathetic, that it doesn't always work out this way. And they're right. It doesn't always. But here is what I know. The moment I stopped reacting and started documenting, the moment I decided that my silence was going to be a strategy and not a surrender, everything changed. Not because the world suddenly became fair, but because I stopped waiting for someone else to see my value, and I started proving it on paper. Sebastian thought the quiet ones finish last. He was wrong about that. He was wrong about a lot of things. If this story hit something in you, if you have ever been the one holding everything together while someone else took the credit, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you are sitting somewhere right now in the middle of your own version of this story, still in the quiet phase, still gathering, still planning, keep going. The balance always comes due.